What a game, going to overtime. To overtime.
What is happening? How is everyone doing? Sam, are you here?
Yo, can you hear me yet?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. We got
We're live, currently live on playback.
Thank you, everyone who's joining us. I know a lot of people, most people, let's be honest, are probably at work. So we're just chilling, kind of processing the press conference that happened a couple hours ago now. At first, thinking that it wasn't at all streamed. Thank you to, who was it, 12 News that had the stream for us.
Yeah.
Because the actual Phoenix Suns organization were, I mean, look, they at least let cameras into the building, but they were a little bit too cowardly to put it up on their YouTube channel themselves. I think because honestly, they were probably afraid of what the YouTube comment section would have said.
Well, not just that, Sam. They also did not do exit interviews with any of the players. And, you know, like Gerald was saying, that in his time covering the Suns, this is the first time they've ever not done that. So like a completely different approach to the end of the season in general. So the combination of doing this press conference, which I do think they deserve some proper credit for doing, compared to, say, what the Dallas Mavericks did with Nico Harrison, but also not having the players face the media, I think is just an interesting choice by them. But let me see if I could do a good job of recapping this press conference for you
real quick,
as good as possible.
Just because a lot of people probably can't be here and we are being asked about it a little bit on Twitter. We probably should release this also. Thank you to everyone who's here, but we probably should release this as a podcast.
It's definitely going to be released on Patreon. It's possibly going to be released on the main feed. Yes.
Possibly on the main feed. I think
probably
there will
should,
be a lot of interest. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the three things I think we can definitely pull from this press conference. We'll get into the details. Here's three things. One, the Phoenix Suns were a soft NBA team. 2, Mike Budenholzer was terrible. And 3, none of it was Matt Ishbia's idea. Those are the three things I think we learned as far as the opinions of James Jones, Josh Bartelstein, and the owner, Matt Ishbia. Is that a good recap of the press conference to you?
Yeah, it's a fairly good recap. I think the most important thing, we're really going to be talking a lot about Ishbia today, because the most bizarre thing about all of it was, like, if Ishbia keeps repeating this phrase of change is coming, and of course a little bit of change is already coming because we know the coach is fired, there'll have to be a new coach, but he's saying more is coming. So to have Josh and James up there is bizarre, because they have to be the change.
Well,
right?
What else could it be? Yeah.
If not them, what is the change? And maybe, James takes like a different role in the organization or something like that, like steps back somehow. But I don't see that as particularly likely. So what was so strange about this is not that Ishbia is leveraging that he has people working under him who he wants to shift some of the blame for what went wrong onto those people. That's normal owner stuff. Unfortunately, it's just not that surprising. Not that it's good, but it's not surprising. Mm-hmm. But why are Josh and James so willing to go along with it was kind of what I came out of the press conference asking myself, because either they have a sort of guarantee or a soft handshake behind the scenes saying that this is how you guys save your jobs, or it doesn't save their jobs and they're on the way out anyway.
Well, if they're not going to send the players out there to answer for what this season was, they're currently part of the front office, James Jones and Josh Bartelstein. If you're not going to send the players out there, you can't do it by yourself. If you're Matt Ishbia, right? You can't do the end of the season press conference, the end of the season interview, just you by yourself. You kind of need the other guys that were there and responsible for the season. And we'll talk about where that responsibility lies too. I do want to get into that in detail. But I think it makes some sense to have them two come out there and talk as well. Like, they were responsible for what this season ended up being. And, the players, too, there's a lot of blame to go around, if you want to call it that, or credit, as Matt Ishbia alluded to both of those things. But those two guys are part of it, so they have to be part of taking some level of responsibility right now. Now, what that looks like later remains to be seen. There was a heavy implication that more changes were coming, and in the chat we said the changes, the hot dogs are going to go back to $10. Maybe that is what it's going to be once the season tickets start getting canceled. But I give some credit to Matt Ishbia for this. I will say, like, we're looking at what the Dallas Mavericks just did with Nico Harrison, where the owner basically forced Nico Harrison to have a closed door, no camera, no microphone press conference with selected group of press there to take notes about what happened, with like no level of accountability from the ownership group and no level of public accountability from Nico Harrison himself. In comparison, I will say Matt Ishbia being willing to go out there and sit behind that table and take questions directly from media and take some level of responsibility for how poor this season went, starting his press conference off saying something that we all felt, which is that this was an embarrassing season and that it was not fun to watch. I give him some credit for that. I think the message that they sent after that, and by the way, as always, credit to the reporters that were there asking the questions, but the message that they sent after that, as far as how involved he is, was somewhat of a mixed message that didn't exactly, I think, quell anyone's concerns as far as his total level of involvement. Like he talked about, I don't watch film, I don't scout players.
Bro, we know.
Yeah.
We know you do. But like the thing is,
you run a mortgage company, yeah.
Well, two things. You can be making decisions without watching film, which in a way is even worse. But also, I thought it was funny. You mentioned that he was bringing up blame as well as credit, because when it goes well, and you want to credit the guys under you. And he brought up Ryan Dunn in that instance. There has never been any doubt in my mind, or I think anyone else's mind, that Matt Ishbia was behind the Ryan Dunn pick or like the Oso Ighodaro pick.
Yeah.
Like, we know, like, the small stuff. No one's ever given you credit or blame for that. Like the bad small stuff too. I don't think Matt Ishbia was out here saying none of us liked the way Tyus Jones' season went all that much. I don't think anyone's out here being like, Matt Ishbia, he really sucks. You want to know why? Because he forced Tyus Jones on us. No one's saying that. The issue we have with Ishbia's involvement.
When Tyus Jones was signed, it was reported that Matt Ishbia called him directly to recruit him to the team.
No one cares. Where it went wrong with this team is the Bradley Beal trade, and potentially, if you want to go this far, the Kevin Durant trade. And we know that
Ishbia that went out. Yeah,
Ishbia was heavily involved in both of those, although he continues to deny it. And you're right, it did not quell anyone's concerns. The way in which, I will give him credit too, it could have been much worse. He did say, I take accountability. He did say, I've made many mistakes. But the way in which he answers all of these questions is always just kind of necessarily vague. That's just the way he approaches everything, all of his interviews.
It's so like when these in general for all teams, it feels like.
When Kellen Olson directly asks him, like, what's the biggest mistake you made? And he can't just come out and say Bradley Beal, because we know that's what he's thinking. But he says, like, oh, I've made many mistakes, just like I'm sure all of you guys in the media have made many mistakes. You've all written things that you haven't been 100% behind before. And he just works his way around to spinning you a nothing burger about, I wish I could have set the culture better. But like, it doesn't really mean anything. You can't actually glean a meaning out of that. And so that's what's disappointing about it. It's not that I don't expect Ishbia to be involved in the decision-making process. It's his money.
Of course he's going to be.
Of course he's going to be.
Yeah.
But like, just this idea that there's this massive misconception out there that Ishbia is handling all the trades, and it's not actually true, and he's never been involved in a single trade or free agent signing. Like, it's just cap. It's just cap.
There's reporting on all of it too, like the Kevin Durant trade, the Bradley Beal trade, even Tyus Jones, like I talked about. He's involved, and that's okay. It's okay for him to be involved to some extent, as long as the people that are basketball people are making the right decisions. And I think even to even go a little further with that, the people who have the level of experience and the right ideas for the team are the people that he's listening to, because you can have an organization full of people, and different kinds of people, whether it be Josh Bartlestein or James Jones, could have his ear in a different level of influence. I think we just saw what happened in Denver, interestingly, where there were guys that were considered the guys for the GM and guys for the coach and different camps for each of those things. And the ownership group just fired all of them, essentially. And so there are different ways to do that as long as he approaches it in the right way going forward. I don't think there's a world where he's just going to be a bad owner forever. I do think this first few years has been a little bit rough, but I think the types of risks that were taken for this team, most of them are pretty defensible in a way where I don't think he's just gone absolutely insane and done all the worst decisions overall. It's just like the way things have worked out over the time that he's owned the team are like the worst possible outcome of every single move that happened, which is really unfortunate and just sort of the curse of the Phoenix Suns fan to some extent. But I do think there's a world where it can get better, and I'm curious if this is going to be a season where it starts to point that way. And we don't really know, right? Because we're not even sure what the future of the front office is going to be or who's going to be the guys making the decisions when it comes to that. He did talk about what the future of the team is going to look like, though.
Yeah. Well, so it's good to have Ishbia's perspective of what the future of the team is going to look like. And
he's the one that we know for sure is going to be around, right? Yeah.
But this is why it was so difficult to ask James or Josh any pointed questions about their vision, because I don't know. No one really still believes that they're going to be here in 2 months, and maybe they will be, but we just don't know. And
I believe Josh will be here in 2 months.
There's
no reason to not believe that.
Yeah, I mean, I could believe that they spin a narrative of Josh is staying on with the team. Someone said in the chat earlier, I forget who, but Josh is staying on. He's going to be more of a financial guy and less of a basketball guy. I don't know. I don't even know if he would publicly take that much of an L, but that would be the smart thing for them to do. So we'll see. There weren't even many questions about Devin Booker and their commitment to Devin Booker in the future. I think obviously, like, you know, Matt would just say that Booker's the franchise player, and that's essentially what he said.
Yeah,
but
the message is clear on that. I don't think we need much more.
You can't ask more specific questions towards someone like James Jones about how you build around Devin Booker, which I would have found kind of interesting. We just don't know what his future holds.
Let's say this then. He talked about what the future of the team could potentially look like, right? Let's just say the identity was probably the biggest theme of the press conference from him and James and even in Josh. And the identity and the future of the team, it seems to be that they want it to be gritty. The grit and grind Suns, I've already seen online a few times. Like, they want it to be gritty. They want it to be athletic. They want it to be players who work hard. Like, I really think they're looking at the last few seasons and going, we built a soft team. And a soft team in particular, in this current climate, the last thing Josh Bartelstein mentioned in his portion of his speaking, I thought was really interesting, because he talked about how the rules have changed a little bit in the last 2 years, and how they're allowing a little bit more physicality. And, you know, as it pertains to this current Suns team, we saw how much players were allowed to do to Kevin Durant in particular. It felt like they were fouling him on every single possession in the playoffs.
We've been begging for, of course, it never got this bad. We never bottomed out until this season, but go back to the finals run where Giannis, you know, forearmed his way to a championship. Like, we've been complaining about how this team needs generally more athleticism, more speed, more physicality for years and years and years. And, you know, this is one of the things where I think there is very legitimate criticisms that could be levied on James Jones, that he's been very slow to react to that and has often gone with his all reliable, tried and true, let's get another 6'5" shooting guard strategy instead. So yeah, they need to pivot away from that strategy. Yeah, sure,
There's more of those, you know?
Sure, they are, but we also traded away first round picks to get those guys, you know? It's like absolutely terrible the way that strategy worked out. And look, if there's anything positive to take away from the presser today, I do think it's this, which is that Matt Ishbia can say he doesn't grind tape and whatever. I believe him that he doesn't. But you don't need to grind tape to understand that this was a soft team, that this was an embarrassing defensive product, that they need to go in a different direction in terms of finding athletes to surround Devin Booker with athletes. Now, I think where this conversation gets a little bit interesting, and again, this is not something that they could have addressed today, but it's like, you still need a second star around Devin Booker if Kevin Durant is not going to be there, if Bradley Beal, who's not a star anyway, is not going to be there. You still need a second star in order to make this a passable product. Ishbia says he wants more wins next season. He was talking about the playoffs today, right? There's no notion that they're just going to blow it up and tank, because they can't. So can you get that second star?
And he doesn't want to. Yeah.
Can you get that second star? What does that second star look like?
That's the important part.
Are they a two-way wing averaging only, 19 or 20 points per game, Jalen Williams style? Or could you get basically another high octane offensive piece at whatever position, really, that Booker needs to be surrounded by someone like that, and then fill out the rest of the defensive and athletic gaps in the roster, regardless of who you get as the second piece?
There's two guys that we traded for, because we've approached our last few podcasts, not this last one, we had the 5-team trade, but the previous two, trying to figure out the type of trade that Matt Ishbia could potentially look for on this team, because we believe that he is not going to look for role players. We believe he's going to try to make a splash once again. And I don't even necessarily think that that's the wrong way to approach it, as long as you can have some level of flexibility afterwards. And the two guys that we mentioned as far as all-stars that you could potentially try to move Kevin Durant to trade for were Domantas Sabonis and Trae Young, both who, by the way, lost in play-in games in the last few days. And
I would say, if anything, the way that people are talking about Domantas Sabonis over the past 24 hours, they got blown out. He had a bad game in the playoffs. There are lots of people talking about him as a regular season merchant right now. I think all of that is great.
Or Trae Young as well, too. Bill Simmons on his podcast said that there's a world where he goes for 50 cents on the dollar. Those are two examples of players that are sort of at a nadir that you could potentially capitalize on. Yeah,
100%. And we understand that it's still going to be difficult to build a championship around those teams, but our current quote unquote championship core won 36 games. So, let's just focus on getting better. And let's get there first.
But if you talk about an identity that's built around grimy, built around grit, defense, I think is something that they're alluding to there, if not directly explicitly mentioning.
Right.
You cannot say that's Trae Young.
And you cannot say
and you can't really say it's Sabonis, but I will say Sabonis is tough. He gets a ton of rebounds. He leads the NBA in rebounds. He plays through injuries constantly. He is a tough person. I don't know that he's the defensive grit that they're looking for. Well, no. I know he's not, is a better way to put that. We know he's not. So I think it's important now, because this is going to be a press conference that you and I are going to reference until they have another one, right? Because this is something that we know about how they feel, and the more they talk, the more we get a better understanding of how they feel. When we approach future fake trades or future evaluation of what the Suns could look like, we have to approach it from what they said. That identity has to dictate the type of players that we're looking at. And I agree, in the chat, somebody's mentioning it. Houston Rockets players are that. Eason, obviously Amen Thompson, but you're not going to be able to get him. But if you can get somebody like Eason, that's an obvious one.
I want to point out a comment from SFans13 a couple minutes ago, who said the talk about grit and grind identity makes sense why they wanted a Butler trade so bad, even to the point of if it would have been sending KD out. That would have been a net positive for this team in terms of grit. I think you could make a case that it would have made them better as a basketball team. I still think it would have been a bad move, because it wouldn't have made you better to the point where Butler is a needle mover. There was no world in which Butler comes in to replace KD and you're a championship contender. It just wasn't going to happen. So of course, if you could have gotten Butler in for Beal, then maybe you're a championship contender.
Yeah, right.
But even if you replaced KD's grit with Butler's grit, you were doing something. And that's why maybe they tried so hard back in February on the Butler conversations.
I know a couple things pretty well. Basketball is up there, but something I think I know better than that is coffee. I love coffee. It's part of my daily routine, and I've made it my mission to find the best coffee roaster, and I think I found them. And I'm so confident in that for the first time ever, I reached out to a company offering to advertise for them, and that company is Alchemy Roast. Alchemy Roast is a Metro Phoenix-based coffee roaster that focuses on the transformational process of coffee from seed to cup. Alchemy Roast is about more than just coffee. It's about passion, dedication, and community. They're a small batch roastery committed to sourcing the finest beans and mastering the art of the roast, and they do it ethically. That's right, ethically. I've made espresso with the Colombian beans, and I would describe it as the best coffee I've ever made at home. This coffee is good, and they can ship it to you. All you have to do is go to alchemyroaster.com and use the promo code TIMELINE at checkout, and you'll get 10% off your order. All the beans are single origin and are roasted perfectly. My favorite, like I said, is the Colombian honey, but try the Guatemalan single origin too for drip coffee, which has the tasting notes of chocolate, almond. It's sweet with a medium body and a smooth finish. Just order now and support them and support us at alchemyroaster.com. Promo code TIMELINE. That's alchemyroaster.com. Promo code TIMELINE at checkout.
The rumor at the time was that the Suns would be getting Butler, Kuminga, and some sort of pick flexibility in the future. And I think regardless of, everything, yeah, I agree they wouldn't have been a contender. I think you're right about that. But that is a good trade. Just in general, I think that would have been pretty good. I think the Suns are looking at a potentially worse trade with KD in this offseason, but we'll see, because like the difference between how teams feel right now and how they'll feel after the playoffs could dramatically impact just how much somebody I think KD could be traded for.
My challenge to Suns fans who keep bringing up Houston, and of course we've done this a couple times on the podcast and we may continue to do it, but just, if you're talking about a Houston trade right now, yeah, I think there's a world where you can, I don't know, maybe you can get Eason. You can definitely probably get Jabari Smith. The key is 3-team trades, and this is where Matt Tallum comes in, who hasn't done shit. But Matt, if you're going to continue in the front office, yeah, that's true. We're counting on you.
He was mentioned by name, by the way, by Matt.
I know. That's why I brought him up, because it jogged my memory. Route Jalen Green to a third team that gets the Suns gritty pieces. And I welcome anyone to message us or send us publicly on Twitter their versions of 3-team trades that involve Jalen Green, because I think we can all agree Jalen Green's he's not a bad player. He is still young. He just turned 23. He's just not the right fit with Devin Booker. There's
he doesn't
no
fit
world.
That identity. That's for sure.
He doesn't fit that identity. And additionally, he's not the level of high level advantage creator that it would take. Like, personally, this is just me personally speaking. I don't know what the Suns would do, but I know Trae Young is not gritty. I'd be willing to overlook that if I could get Trae Young because of how high level an advantage creator he is. And then in my book, energy, grit, defense, these are things that flow out of advantage creation. Advantage creation has to be the center of your identity. The other stuff comes later. So I could give someone like Trae Young a pass. I can't give someone like Jalen Green a pass. I know that Jalen Green and Devin Booker together is basically like Bradley Beal and Devin Booker together. It's a roadmap to 30 wins.
Yeah, Jalen Green is better than Bradley Beal, but that is not saying much. I think of all the players who played the amount of minutes that Bradley Beal has played, he was the worst technically in plus minus in net rating. So that is what it is. But let me bring up a couple of other things that I noticed. I found it interesting that Matt Ishbia mentioned scouts multiple times. Did that stand out to you at all?
Not especially. Where are you going with it?
He constantly talks about not caring about picks.
Oh, yeah.
But then mentioned scouts multiple times. And this stood out to me, I think, as a Suns fan who's, and obviously we've covered the team for 7 seasons now, going into our 8th season. The Suns previously spent no money on scouts, like nothing. That's famously something that Robert Sarver would not do. He would not hire a lot of scouts. They had the smallest scouting department for a long time, and they used a lot of third-party scouts. They used guys who would be hired, contracted to scout for the team, but were not full-time employees.
Friends of the pod.
People that have come on the podcast, yeah.
People who have come on the podcast and we like.
Yeah, we had the guy who scouted Cam Johnson, yeah.
It would be like, come and work for the Suns for 4 months and then give us suggestions and we'll disregard all of your suggestions.
Yeah, you won't
that would
get
be the type of scouting work.
Right, you won't get dental insurance. We'll pay you a little bit of money and then you'll be fired. Yeah. But I do appreciate, because here's the thing about Matt Ishbia. I do think he has been overly involved, and I do think he is a bit of a double talker when it comes to listening to him speak. But he is so desperate to win. Desperate for this team to win.
Championships, plural.
Yes, he said championships. He promised the Suns will win championships with an S, plural. He's so desperate for this team to win, and it's not like the way that I believe there are owners New Orleans Pelicans, for example, Robert Sarver, for example, who just want the team to not cost them too much. They want the team to be profitable. And like everything else comes, with that, whether they're winning, that helps them to be profitable. Like it all flows to that sense of what it is. He's not like that. Like he does genuinely want the team to be successful. He wants the team to be a winner, and he wants them to win multiple championships. And maybe he's not quite finding the best approach to that yet. But I don't in any way doubt the desire. I don't in any way doubt that that is the end goal that he has for this team. And I do think there are ownership groups out there where you can doubt that. Most of them maybe not. But I do think that he is the type that will put the money into it to make that possible. We just need the decision making to line up with the money at the right time in order for that to work. And that does include spending a ton of money on scouting. Like ultimately, every pick, you have to make the best pick possible. And you're not going to. No GM does, but you have to have as much data, as much knowledge as possible informing those decisions that you make in order to make sure that there was nothing left on the table. And I do believe he's working towards that and towards the right things there.
We already know that Ishbia has made massive investments, not just in the Phoenix Suns, but in the Mercury as well. He touted $100 million for the Mercury training facility as an accomplishment of his, as he has the right to do. That's impressive. It's right up there with the free games on cable, or free games on Antenna, and there's the other one, the hot dog thing.
Mm-hmm.
He mentioned the hot dog thing again. Look, I will always
he deserves credit for that. Yeah, he's done.
I will always give you credit for the hot dog thing, Matt Ishbia. No one can take that away from you.
When Sam was here, how many hot dogs did you eat when you were here in town?
I only 2 every game, but that would be my go-to. I would go to every game and I would get 2 hot dogs because why would I buy anything else? Anyway, so yeah, he gets credit for all of that. Regarding the pick thing, I don't think it's that Ishbia hates all draft picks. I don't think that's going to be their strategy for the next decade. Like I think we've maybe gone a little bit too far in one direction. He doesn't hate 18-year-olds like anywhere. I think he just hates or doesn't respect the value of lottery picks. And that's fine. That's why they've already traded all their would-be lottery picks. And they've already traded, swaps a million times. But due to laws literally in the CBA, like you need to have a certain amount of picks. You need to have a first-round pick every other year. It might be the 30th overall pick every single year. But Ishbia is going to trade
him as soon as you draft him, too.
That's true too. But he is going to continue to have scouts in place because I think like you look at the way that he touts Ryan Dunn as a current accomplishment. And if he has that as at least something small that he can hang off his cap, he will continue to look for other like small investments like that in the late first round, second round, players who he can add and develop long term. So they're going to have picks, right? We know they have picks. They're just not high or good picks, and we have to live with that. But we do get to cover the draft in some capacity this year, which I am excited about, I will say.
One thing I wanted to mention too, I talked about it at the beginning here. They did not like Mike Budenholzer, man. You could just really tell the way they talked about that. They were not a fan, and rightfully so. He didn't do a good job. Like I want to clarify that. I'm not trying to defend him or anything here. But also, James Jones said they rushed the Budenholzer hire. Did you notice that? Yeah,
I did notice that.
What in the world? I mean, I guess there was some level of him saying, because they're out of the playoffs, they have more time to sort of evaluate everyone and hire a coach or evaluate the players or everyone. There was an implication that everything was involved here. But last season, they rushed the hire with Budenholzer, which I thought was particularly interesting because if you remember, they didn't fire Frank Vogel right away the way they did with Bud this year. They actually took, I think, about a week, maybe 5-6 days after the season ended to evaluate everything. I'm going to put that in quotes again. And then fired Frank Vogel at that point, and then I guess rushed the hire. But they interviewed a bunch of people, and they interviewed a few of them multiple times. Like, we know they interviewed a few of them multiple times. I'm not sure what that means or what he was alluding to. I kind of wish there was a little more digging into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look back on it, it's just Bud was such a picture-perfect match for the Suns on paper. And obviously, I have no idea what those actual interviews with him were like, or what sort of questions they were asking to evaluate like what his basketball strategy would be or what his communication strategy would be, because it seems like so much of the breakdown with Bud in losing the locker room
Right.
was his inability to communicate with the players, particularly the star players. So yeah, they should have done more of their due diligence with that and not rushed the process. But just from the optics, he was coming here, another championship coach, had literally beat the Suns and Devin Booker in the finals a few years prior, is an Arizona product who, remember, in his introductory press conference last year for the Suns, seemed just like totally giddy to be back home.
Mhm.
And that energy and that life
It's the,
was just
the
was
most fun
just
we've ever had this season. Yeah.
was just quickly sucked or drained out of Bud. And we don't know exactly why, but within 20 games into the season, just drained out of him. But it made sense at the time, like why on paper it felt like a right fit. Yeah, all we can say now is that they're not going to rush this process. We don't anticipate them hiring a coach anytime in the next couple weeks, if not a few weeks. It might be months. It might be after the playoffs. So it's going to be a little bit.
Grit, grimy, hard workers, defense. That was not only used, those words were not only used to describe the future players of the Suns team, the identity of the team as a whole, but also the coach. Did anyone stand out in your mind when he was talking? Because the first thing I thought was Malone.
The first thing I thought of was Mike Malone too. And I'll say, I still think Devin Booker is going to be heavily involved in this process this time. And I do think that for that reason, the odds of them nabbing a former player are just way higher than they were in the previous two cycles. But they're never going to come out in a press conference and say, we want a former player.
We're ruling
as
out
coach.
everyone else. Yeah.
Because
yeah,
then you rule out 60% of your candidate pool from the start. They're just not going to do that. It's ridiculous.
and it's possible we don't really know what Booker wants in this scenario too, but there were rumors in the past that was something that the players were looking for a former player as a coach. So, but Malone in particular, which is kind of interesting because the Nuggets don't exactly have a great defense, and I think that's where they struggled. Kind of gritty, kind of grimy, calls guys out in press conferences, not afraid to do those kinds of things. And I'm not sure if that's something that Booker wants. I'm not sure if that's something the team wants. But even as I was thinking that, and as he was describing it, I was thinking, I don't think they'll hire Michael Malone. I just don't think that's something they want.
You know who's been a top 10 defense in the NBA for 5 years straight? And
The
maybe
Heat?
would not be your first thought. Oh, well, you got it. The Miami Heat. So I think
Sorry.
Chris Quinn comes up again as, obviously it's very clear the defensive strategy that they've tried to, I mean, it's changed a little bit this year because Bam has not been playing center throughout all of this season, which is a change in the Heat strategy. Previously, he was always the 5 and they were undersized, but they were switching out like the Suns were doing with Oso this year. And you could see a path forward, I think, for a coach to come in and say, we're going to try and be scrappy, but maybe a little bit undersized still like the Heat were.
Yeah.
So I think that makes Chris Quinn definitely an interesting candidate because he does have both the pedigree, the resume experience of saying this was a really good defense for years and years that he's been with the Heat, but also he does have the player experience. Now, Chris Quinn didn't have like the greatest NBA career. This is not like if I don't know, Steve Nash or Sam Cassell came in and coached and were
It's more like Jared Dudley, yeah.
MVP or I mean he did, like frankly and like I have the utmost respect for anyone who's in the NBA for even 1 minute because it's so far beyond the level of basketball I've ever played, but it's not even at the level of Jared Dudley. I think Chris Quinn had like 3 seasons in the NBA or 4. I don't remember. I need to look.
Looking at his stats right now, he played from 06-07 to 2012-2013. His peak was 7.8 points per game on the Miami Heat in 07-08, along with 3 assists. He
Yeah,
played
so
60
like
games.
I would think that if the
Backup point guard type
hypothesis
player.
if the hypothesis is that you need to trust, like players trust other former players, then I would hope that there's this shared camaraderie in NBA locker rooms that kind of acknowledges like, okay, if you were a 10-minute per game guy, that's fine. We still understand you can be a vocal leader. We still like rely on your knowledge and lean on that. But I can't guarantee that. Maybe the guys would be more comfortable listening to a Steve Nash type who won MVPs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not sure that Steve Nash personifies. I don't know. Maybe he does
Grit?
actually.
Steve Nash personifies.
He shot shots with the eye swollen shut, and he cracked his nose back into place when it was broken. So that's pretty gritty, actually, now that I think about it.
Steve Nash absolutely personifies personal grit in terms of his commitment to doing the most for his team on the basketball court and like his selflessness and all of that. He's not going to yell at you. He's not going to yell at anyone. And so I don't know, maybe that's not necessarily like the right leadership style anyway, but like, do we want Steve Nash counting high fives on the sideline either for next year's version of the Suns?
Maybe.
Or do we need someone a little bit meaner?
I don't know
I'm
that they
leaning
need
on-
to be mean. I just want them to understand modern basketball. Like, that's really what I want them to understand, which is why one thing I'll say I appreciate, once again, Josh Bartlestein bringing up how the game is officiated now and how that can change how you add players to the team, which, by the way, is something we talked about 2 years ago after the playoffs, because when essentially they punished the NBA players by allowing them to get hit a little harder after they didn't try hard in the All-Star break, like that is something you have to factor into how you're building a team now. The game is played differently. It is like, I think a lot of people look at how many 3-point shots are shot by teams and they think, well, the game has sort of been the same for years. It's not. It's different. Athletes, depth, ability to run fast, ability to play a little bigger, and ability to play defense, that matters more than it did 5-6 years ago. This Suns team that we currently had would have been a better team 5-6 years ago, but not now. Not with teams like OKC, Houston, and Boston in the league. Those teams are different, and that's a better way to succeed. And I hope they understand that, and I hope they take it into it. And it seems like they're acknowledging that. Like, I don't know what options because like all of this is good. You can say all the right things, which I don't know that they did. They said some things I loved and some things I didn't, but they don't have a ton of options. So every single little move that they make has to be nailed in order for them to be a pretty good team next year.
This is why it's going to be so fascinating for us to talk about every move, though. Like, I think the biggest challenge for them is like getting off the Beal contract or nailing the KD trade, right? But like, let's even give them the benefit of the doubt and say they can do those things. Even after that, I think another challenge for whoever this front office is going to be is improving the athleticism, the speed, the grit without backsliding in other areas. Because as we mentioned, the Suns were a super, super efficient offensive team from most spots on the floor. And you had guys like Tyus Jones and Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal all shooting 50+% on corner threes or just like slinging catch and shoot threes. I mean, again, one of the few successes of this team this year was that Bud actually did get them to shoot more threes, and it went up and down and it wavered throughout the season. But for the most part, they were playing that relatively modern offense. As far as I'm concerned, I was so disappointed. I mean, we know Tyus can't do anything defensively, and I was so disappointed with the defensive effort by the end of the season from guys like Grayson and Royce that I feel no personal attachment to those guys if they come back or not. But if you get in other role players to replace them, those role players can't just all be Ryan Dunn. You know, like someone needs to shoot threes on this team and someone needs to have some offensive skill as well. So finding the balancing act is just going to be really difficult. Like you said, they need to nail every move. It's going to be kind of fascinating to see play out.
Volume of shooting is almost more important than overall efficiency at this point. Turn as many of your shots into threes as possible, as long as you have the defense to get back in transition, and you can possibly create enough turnovers that you're playing fast enough to get easy buckets at the rim with those athletes that you actually have. That's what Houston does, and there's a way to be. Honestly, that's what OKC does, because they have pretty good shooting, but they have a couple of guys on that team that don't really shoot that well either, and they make up for it by having just a lot more possessions as a team. So there's other ways you could build a team if you don't have as efficient shooting, efficiency merchants, as you say. If you're not going to be efficiency merchants, create more possessions, get more offensive rebounds, force more turnovers, find ways to play fast so you get some high level, high percentage, easy buckets at the rim over and over again. Anyone in the chat?
We should address this question from the chat real quick from JBR827. Would you all support trading for Zion?
If it's Brad?
We haven't talked about it yet. If it's Brad,
yes,
of course.
Yes.
But if it's KD, no. I'm
No.
sorry, guys.
Yeah.
We just can't risk another massively embarrassing move where they trade for Zion as the centerpiece of a KD package, let's say, and he plays 25 games next year, which, let's be honest, is
Likely.
like the most likely scenario. At his best, he plays 60 games, maybe. And like the median outcome is he plays 30.
Mhm.
And that would just be, I wish the best
That's what he
for
played this
Zion.
game.
I
Yeah.
hope he can figure it out at some point in his career. They can't do it. They just can't risk it.
4 of his 7 seasons, 6 seasons. Yeah, what does he have? 6 seasons. 4 of his 6 seasons is either 30 games or less. So yeah, I think we're
He's
pretty.
played 214 games in 6 seasons, which is an average of
Not very much.
35 games
Yeah.
per season.
Yeah. So, it is what it is. But like I said, if you're trading Brad, then yeah, sure, why not? Yeah. But if you're trading KD, no, definitely not.
Yeah,
Is there any
30
other
30
quick-
games? 30 games of Zion is easily worth more than 82 games of Brad if you could
Yeah.
do that next year. So
if does anyone in the chat have any questions or anything that we missed from the press conference that you'd like us to talk about before we get going here? Because I think we've pretty much covered everything I want to cover. I think, like I said, this specific press conference and the things that they talked about today is the type of thing that we're going to look back throughout this offseason pretty regularly and see if they're making decisions and if they're making moves that actually line up with the vision that they talked about in this press conference, because they're setting themselves up for some sort of standard, and we have to see if they're actually meeting that standard. So Robbie in the chat is saying, thoughts on Wendy saying KD trade will be less than what everyone thinks because of the money aspect.
I didn't see him say that. Was that new?
No,
That
it's
just happened.
it's from like a week and a half ago, and I really
Okay.
did not read what he said in the same way. What he said is that the KD trade will likely be for flexibility. And honestly, I think that we've all kind of thought that already. But like, what else would it be if not for flexibility? Like, it's always going to be multiple role players and hopefully a pick, and likely taking back less money in order to get out of the second apron. That's kind of
Yeah, I
how
think-
all of our trades were built, outside of the home run trades that we are just throwing out there about Trae Young and Sabonis. So
Yeah,
to
I'm
me,
not
that's exactly what I expected.
I'm not expecting like a massive home run, although don't get me wrong, like the Trae Young, Sabonis, like those types of proposals that we've thrown out there are awesome in my opinion. Of course, not everyone feels that way. I think as long as you have 3 or 4 devoted teams in there driving up a bidding war, and you're also willing to go out there and explore 3-team solutions so that it doesn't just have to be, yes, we'll take Jalen Green. Yes, we'll take Jaden McDaniels, Mikal Bridges. Like some of those guys would be great, but like you don't necessarily have to just settle for whatever those 3 teams are willing to give you. I think they'll get a decent return. I'm not too worried about it, to be honest.
Yeah. I agree.
How would you compare running the podcast to running a mortgage business? Asks Ravi.
Matt Ishbia multiple times compared it to running a mortgage business. And also, actually, Bartlestein made that comparison.
Would
as
you
well.
say that you're
I have
as
no idea what
qualified-
either of those things are like.
Well, that's very noble of you to admit, but would you say you're as qualified to run a mortgage business as Josh Bartlestein is to run basketball operations for an NBA team?
Well, he did play. He was a walk-on for a college team. So, and I do have a mortgage. So if that counts, then yes, I do think I am. Somebody said, "Can we make this audio available on Patreon?" I think we're going to post this as a main feed podcast. I think there's enough people that want.
Everyone eats.
Yes, everyone eats. This is a free one. Have we
Recession
talked about?
indicator.
Have we talked
More
about-
main feed episodes from the timeline.
Yeah. Have we talked recession indicator? 110 people in playback on a Thursday afternoon. Have we talked about how we're feeling about James Jones's future after this press conference? We have, and honestly, like I think that James Jones overall has done a good job as the Suns general manager. I think if everyone's fired after this season, it's completely defensible to do that. The only thing that matters after that is who is the person making decisions after that, because there is a world where you fire James Jones and it gets worse.
What if they keep James and Josh and fire Matt Tellum and are just like, this guy did everything.
We
was all
did
his
a single
idea.
3-team trade. Yeah. Yeah, no, I get that. Let's see what else we got. Let's see. Playback is struggling here. Thoughts on Taylor Jenkins? We talked about Taylor Jenkins on a recent podcast. I'm less of a fan than Sam, but not completely ruling it out. I think he's a pretty good coach, and it wouldn't be a disaster. I'm sort of disillusioned with the way that all the players stopped listening to the last 2 championship-winning coaches, like 3/4 of the way through the seasons. So, like, every coach seems like a bad idea in my mind right now.
Yeah, keep in mind, we are also assuming, though, that like maybe 5 or 6 of these players are actually back next season. Like, I'm expecting it to be a mostly new locker room. So I don't know how that changes your opinion. The most important guy's
in some ways it does,
opinion is Devin Booker. Yeah. I have no idea what Devin Booker thinks of Taylor Jenkins. Personally, I would be really into the idea of Taylor Jenkins. Not sure if those guys have some sort of existing relationship, though.
Yeah. ABZ18 said, what's the best player you think you could get in a KD trade as a second star? We made fake trades for Trae Young, Sabonis. Those are not likely.
I don't think you could do any better than Trae Young, right? Like,
yeah, no.
I don't know. Jaylen Brown, would that in any world be a possibility?
Maybe. The worst contract in the NBA, as people say. I think Jaylen Brown's pretty good. Tari Eason, maybe a more realistic one. Not exactly a second star, but somebody who could be a pretty good young player that has some level of potential that could play next to Devin Booker. Might be hard to get him. Maybe you could pull off a trade where you get Şengün from the Rockets if they just decide they want to keep all their wings, and maybe you can get Şengün from the Rockets. So there's another guy. Will Matt Ishbia get his apology from Stephen A. Smith? This is not something we talked about. Stephen A. Smith, insanely, by the way, we've talked about this at all. Insanely, Stephen A. Smith said Matt Ishbia is on the trajectory to be the worst owner in the history of the NBA.
I try to mostly ignore Stephen A.
It's so stupid. I'm sorry. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
Matt Ishbia has done a poor job in 2 seasons. It's 2 seasons where the team has just struggled. You cannot put that on the same par as what owners have done throughout the history of the NBA. We're not even going to talk about what they are, but we know. Just look at the last one.
Yeah, he knew it would get a reaction out of people, particularly Matt. I also think, look, I'm going to defend Matt on this one because I know he's not the worst owner in the history of the NBA, but Matt, in classic Matt Ishbia fashion, he's asked about what does he think about Stephen A's comments, and he talks for about 4 minutes, and then he's like, probably don't spend too much time thinking about what Stephen A has to say.
I
and
expect an apology, though. He did
it's
say.
Maybe
no, what's going to
don't
happen
show all your cards on that one.
No, Stephen A. Smith's going to double down in a really stupid way on ESPN and try and use it for content. That's what's going to happen. Vega Rob said, do you think we figure out a way to get off Beal? No, I think he's going to be waived and stretched. Right, Sam? Are we both on the same page there?
Yeah, I think he's going to be waived and stretched. And
I
guess
presents
some very interesting trade ideas after that happens and you're no longer in the second apron. Not that I agree entirely with the idea of waiving and stretching him, because I do think it's very irresponsible in a lot of ways. But it does give us more trade content for the pod, so I don't mind that.
Yeah. You got anything else before we go, Sam?
I don't think so. I would say, we'll be here in case any other emergencies break, but mostly we're just expecting a normal schedule for the rest of this week. We're not expecting, a coach to be hired or anything like that anytime soon. If James Jones or Bartlestein do get fired, then expect an emergency podcast from us. But otherwise, I think it's going to be business as usual, and we'll just try to enjoy the NBA playoffs as they happen.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out. And yeah, we'll be back soon. At some point, we're going to have a Patreon podcast where we give out our Hustle Player of the Year award. Since the Suns apparently are not going to do that. They're not going to do that themselves. They haven't given out a Hustle Player of the Year award. So appreciate you all for hanging out here live, and everyone listening, we appreciate you as well. We'll be back very soon.